I thought flying first class would finally feel like a reward for all my hard work. But the moment I walked down that aisle, someone was already sitting in my seat, refusing to move. At first, I thought it was a mistake, until the whispers started. Eyes glared at me like I didn't belong there. The humiliation, the disbelief, it all crashed down at once. But what happened next didn't just ruin my flight, it grounded the entire plane. How could one stolen seat turn into chaos at 30,000 feet? My life had finally started to feel like it was moving in the right direction. I'd been working long hours, saving every extra dollar, and after years of struggling, I finally treated myself to something I'd never experienced before. My very first-class ticket. To most people, it's just a seat on a plane, but to me it was a symbol. A reminder that all the sacrifices, all the late nights, all the moments I felt like giving up were finally worth something. That morning, I arrived at the airport early, checked in with a smile, and even texted my family, telling them I couldn't wait to experience this little taste of luxury. For once, I wanted to feel like I belonged in a space that wasn't usually made for people like me. But deep down, there was still that quiet voice of doubt, the one that had followed me since childhood, the one that whispered, "People will always try to remind you of your place." I tried to shake it off, convincing myself this was just another flight. Nothing could go wrong, right? I had no idea that the moment I stepped onto that plane, everything I had worked so hard for would be tested, because in just a few seconds, I was about to face a humiliation so public, so unfair, that it would end with the entire flight being grounded. As soon as I boarded the plane, I felt my chest tighten with excitement. My ticket said 2A, a window seat in first class. I walked down the aisle, heart pounding, ready to sit down and savor the moment. But when I reached my row, someone was already there. A middle-aged man, casually reclining, headphones in, like the seat had been his all along. I double-checked my ticket, then leaned closer. "Excuse me, I think that's my seat." He barely looked at me. With a dismissive wave, he muttered, "No, I don't think so." My throat went dry. The flight attendant came over, and I showed her my boarding pass. She frowned, glanced at me, then at him. That was when it started. The stares from other passengers. A couple whispered, one even shook their head as if I was the one out of place. The attendant turned back to me. Her voice was flat, cold. "Sir, maybe you should check economy." "Are you sure this is your seat?" That question cut deeper than I can explain. I had the proof right there in my hand. Still, she doubted me. She doubted I even belonged in that cabin. I tried again, louder this time, so everyone could hear. "This is my seat. I paid for it." "I'm not moving." The man smirked, then leaned back further, crossing his arms like he had just won some silent battle. And the murmurs grew louder around me. Words like entitled and troublemaker floated through the air, sharp enough to sting. At that moment, I wasn't just fighting for a seat. I was fighting against the unspoken belief that someone like me could never belong there. My hands trembled, but I stood tall. The attendant sighed, clearly annoyed, and called for her supervisor. Now the tension in the cabin was thick enough to choke on. Every eye was locked on me. Some passengers looked angry, others curious, but not a single one spoke up. The supervisor arrived, and I braced myself. This was my chance. I held out my ticket again. My voice cracked, but I stayed firm. "This is my seat. Why are you protecting him instead of doing your job?" For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would finally take my side. But the supervisor only hesitated. And in that hesitation, I felt something darker. It wasn't about the ticket anymore. It was about me. Then, out of nowhere, the man in my seat shouted, "This is harassment! He's threatening me!" His words cut through the cabin like a siren. Gasps erupted. People shifted uncomfortably, some glaring at me as though I had done something dangerous. And just like that, the situation spiraled. The crew whispered among themselves, then one of them picked up the intercom. My stomach dropped as I heard the words I never expected on what should have been the happiest flight of my life. "Captain, we may need to delay takeoff. We have a situation in first class." The entire plane went silent. My fight for one seat had just turned into a fight that could ground the entire flight. The engines had gone quiet. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but firm. "We're returning to the gate until this situation is resolved." My heart dropped. The entire plane groaned in frustration, dozens of passengers glaring at me as if I were the reason their trip was ruined. In their eyes, I wasn't a paying customer fighting for the seat I earned. I was the problem. Two security officers boarded, walking straight toward me. My palms turned cold, my chest tight. I held out my boarding pass, my voice cracking. "This is my seat. I didn't do anything wrong." But the man in my seat played his part perfectly. He leaned forward, pointing at me. "He's aggressive. He's making me feel unsafe." Those words. They landed like a death sentence. The officers hesitated, looking at me like I was already guilty. I could feel the weight of every stereotype pressing down, crushing me. No matter how calm I stayed, no matter how polite my words were, they only seemed to see what they wanted to see. And then it happened. One officer reached for my arm. Not to guide me, but to remove me, in front of everyone. My throat burned, my vision blurred with humiliation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask every passenger watching why no one spoke up, why no one said, "Check his ticket. Look at the truth." But the silence was deafening. Just when I thought I'd be dragged off, one small detail changed everything. Another passenger, a woman seated across the aisle, stood up. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Enough. I saw him show his ticket. That's his seat. You're all just ignoring it." For the first time, someone believed me. The cabin froze. And in that moment, the power shifted. The moment that passenger spoke up, everything shifted. The supervisor froze. The officers exchanged a glance. And for the first time, they actually looked down at the ticket still shaking in my hand. Silence swept the cabin as the truth stared them in the face. Seat 2A was mine all along. The man who had stolen my seat grew red with embarrassment, fumbling excuses, but the damage was already done. The officers backed away, the crew suddenly apologetic, and I was finally allowed to sit where I belonged. But the victory didn't feel sweet. It felt heavy. Because I knew if that one woman hadn't found the courage to speak out, I would have been dragged off that plane, not for breaking rules, but for daring to exist in a place people didn't think I belonged. That flight eventually took off, but I sat in silence, staring out the window, carrying a truth I couldn't shake. Sometimes the world doesn't see your ticket, your hard work, your right to be there. It only sees the color of your skin, and that's what cut the deepest. Not the humiliation, not even the fear, but the realization that in a cabin full of people, only one person believed me enough to speak out. So I ask you this. How many times do injustices go unchallenged because people stay silent? How many voices are ignored? How many lives disrupted simply because no one dares to say, "This isn't right"? Maybe the real question is, next time you see it happening, will you stay silent too? Or will you be the one voice that changes everything?